Hey, James here. And have you ever had an employee that you were trying to coach or trying to give some feedback, you're trying to help them improve, and you just feel like they're resisting you, even if just in the most subtle ways. And so they're fighting your coaching and your intention to try to help them develop. Well, if so, you're not alone. A lot of people, when they know as managers that they need to coach their staff, but then they go try and they're met with some resistance. And then often what happens is they just bail out. They think, why bother putting in the effort to do that? So what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through 10 different reasons why your employees might be resisting your coaching. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and walk through these fairly quickly. Let's start with number one. Number one is just a simple fear of change, right? So we all understand this concept of homeostasis. Hey, our world is good, otherwise we'd be changing it on our own. And then someone comes into our life and wants to coach us, which is almost like sending this message, hey, where you're at is not fine. Something needs to change. And for a lot of people, it just kicks off this fear of like, oh my goodness, change is coming. And one of the ways around this is to make sure that you're constantly reinforcing a culture of learning, a culture of development, right? Which means we're always talking about it, talking about having a growth mindset. You yourself are leading the way, sharing what you're learning, sharing how you're getting coached, these types of things. And that's going to be one of the best ways to deal with people having a fear of change. Promote a growth mindset always in your team. Secondly, a lack of trust. Coaching is something that is definitely more intimate because it's a conversation between your direct employee and you. And often we're dealing with personal development type things. So for example, let's say you're coaching on one of your employees on their confidence, right? They need to become more confident. Well, they might have to share some things of how they think or what they believe, or maybe some of their insecurities. And that is one of those things. It's hard to be vulnerable. And if people don't have a deep trust in you as a manager and as a person, then they're not going to be as vulnerable with you. And when people lack trust in you or in any of us, what happens is people protect themselves against us. We do this all the time, right? If you go in and maybe you go to a store and somebody's trying to sell you something, you don't really trust that person. And so what happens is you resist their influence, right? They're asking you the questions and you know they're just trying to sell you. And so we give short answers back. We don't show emotion. That's an example of when we don't trust somebody and we resist influence. So how do we break this? Well, part of this is going to be just all the good things we know about building trust with our staff, taking a genuine interest in them, those small moments to get to know them, letting them get to know you. Sometimes that's through you sharing about just your life, your day, storytelling, all of those different things, keeping your word, setting an example. A culture of trust and psychological safety is absolutely essential, or people are going to resist your coaching. Okay, number three is a fear of inadequacy. Now, this sort of goes back to number one about a fear of change, but often when people when they can tell, oh, coaching is coming, they can feel like, well, coaching must be coming because I'm not doing something good enough. And that is a primal fear for so many of us, this I'm not good enough. And we shove it down. We don't want to deal with it. And we just want to put it down way deep, deep down under the ocean, right? And then you come along as a coach, as a manager, and you want to begin talking about an area where they need to grow. Well, that can bring up that fear of inadequacy. And so what do people do? They go into protection mode and they begin to resist a bit. They're just trying to protect an ego there. And so again, this is similar to number one. This is why we want to be creating a culture of learning, a culture of development, and certainly a growth mindset, right? You can look up Carol Dweck's work about that. But growth mindset, this idea that, hey, feedback is good. And of course, I'm not perfect, but I can get better. We want to reinforce that culture over and over and over again. That's going to help you when it comes to coaching. Number four, missing the purpose. Now, a lot of people, they relate coaching with something punitive. And this is sad that this is like this, but they do so for a good reason. In other words, a lot of people get coaching only when it's like a last resort. They're about to get fired. Oh, like get them coaching, right? It's like the last resort to turn them around. And that's not what we want coaching to be. We want coaching to be something positive. People desire to grow. That's one of the highest drivers of engagement. And so if we start coaching our staff and we haven't for a while, they might think, oh, it's because I'm doing something wrong. That's not necessarily the case. It's just, hey, this is part of all of what we do. It's to develop. And of course, what is the purpose? The purpose is to help them reach their potential in the context of the workplace, right? You're not their life coach for their life. You're not the coach of their marriage or their relationships, but you are going to lean into that space from the context of work. And it's that commitment. Hey, I'm here to help you reach your potential here in the workplace. Now, that doesn't mean that you're above them, the teacher, or better than them, but you're just that catalyst, right? That's what we want to be. So we want to make sure the purpose is clear. Number 5, a lack of time. I don't know anyone who doesn't feel like they have more on their plate than they have time to handle. It's just everyone. And so sometimes your employees will resist coaching because they feel like, I just got so much to do. Like, can we have this conversation another time? Because I'm trying to catch up. And so this is why our coaching needs to be dialed in, right? We need to not waste a lot of time with it, but also kind of back to the last point about purpose. We have to help our employees understand this is an important part of everything we do. And of course, you got to lead the way on this, right? You've got to be getting coached from your boss. Now, if your boss isn't coaching you, they should be, but if they're not, then you can invite that. You can go talk to your boss and say, hey, I would like to get some coaching. I'd like to get some help on the areas that I feel like I need to develop, okay? Number 6, a threat to autonomy. Autonomy is one of our highest drivers also of motivation, especially intrinsic motivation. People don't want to be micromanaged. And coaching, when it's not done right, can seem like a micromanagement. Like, hey, you need to do this and you need to do that. But that's not what coaching is. Coaching is asking people to self-identify. It's really coming along beside them, and it's not taking away their autonomy. But they might think that because maybe in the past they had a boss who coaching just meant, hey, you need to do things my way. So we have to make sure that people don't have that fear of losing autonomy in some way. Number 7, inconsistency. So if you have been inconsistent in coaching them, then they're not going to be super excited when you come again and say, hey, let's get back to our coaching times, because maybe this is the 4th time you've got back to their coaching times, and it's sending a message to them that this is not really that important. So we want to make sure we're consistent with our coaching times, which honestly, most of those should happen in our one-to-ones, which should happen at least every other week. We have that time with each of our direct reports. All right. So we got to make sure we're consistent. Number 8, why people resist your coaching might be because there's just low motivation or commitment on their part. So when I am taking people through one of our programs where we're talking about coaching, basically I was just talking about this the other day. If people don't see that something is a problem, then they're less likely to buy in, to want to put effort towards changing. So for example, let's go back to confidence. Let's say somebody is not confident in their work and it's absolutely affecting things. It might be affecting how they do, or with clients or with the team. And a lot of times people will think, well, it would be good to improve in that, but it's not a problem. And what we have to help people understand is that this is a problem. Like whatever it is, if we don't change it, it's a problem. It's always varying degrees of problem, of course. But when we help someone understand the reason why we need to work on an area, we're going to get them to buy in. And of course, one of the best ways to do that is first to ask them, hey, where do you think you need to grow? Where do you want to improve? What do you think is going to make you better at your role? And hear from them, because when it's their idea, they're going to be a lot more committed to the process than if it's just your idea and you're plopping it down on their plate. Number 9, why people resist your coaching is that they might prefer their own methods. In other words, they got their way of doing things. And don't come into my space and mess things up because I got it. This almost goes back to number 2, right? A fear of change, or number 1, fear of change. But the idea here is, again, that sometimes people, they don't like change. They got their method to do it, and they think with coaching you're going to change that. Now, maybe the coaching is going to change their method, or maybe it's not. It's just going to help them find more resources within them that maybe they're going to change their own methods. And then lastly, number 10, a lack of confidentiality. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this as a problem where an employee goes and they're getting coached by their manager, and then they say some things within that coaching conversation. And then their boss goes and tells their boss, and then eventually their boss somehow comes back around and talks to the employee. And the employee feels like, I told you that in confidence, not to go tell your boss. And anytime we violate confidentiality, then that is going to absolutely cut off your influence to try to coach your employees. And so one of the things you want to do when you're coaching your staff is that you make it clear is that, listen, when we have our coaching times, these are confidential times. Like, this is a space where you can speak honestly, and I'm not going to go and tell somebody. If I feel like I need to seek advice on an issue that you've brought up, I will first ask you if it's okay if I talk to my boss, for example. Like, hey, I'd like to get my boss to weigh on in this because they have a lot of experience here. Would you mind if I bring this up with them? That's the only time that you're going to go and bring something that, and that's not breaking confidentiality, that's getting permission. Of course, there is a time to break confidentiality, and that's if somebody has said something that would imply somebody's going to get harmed or something serious like that. Then, of course, you're not going to keep that confidential, but that should be pretty obvious. Okay, so those are 10 different reasons why your staff might be resisting your coaching. And again, great leaders coach their staff. They have those conversations. And the last thing I'll say about this is, before you can actually get into the coaching, you have to solve whatever the problem is that's causing resistance to coaching. In other words, if you don't solve that first, then just trying to run into coaching and hoping that you win them over, it's going to be like pushing a rock uphill. We have to have those bold, those courageous conversations. And when we do that, we clear the way. So there's an understanding both ways what this is all about and how you are committed to helping them grow and get better. All right. If you haven't been coaching for a while, make sure you jump back in. Other than that, I'll see you next time. For more tips, tools, leadership help, go to jamesrobbins.com.